We're rolling. So the idea here, and Joe and I talked about this, and Mindy was part of that conversation too a month or so ago. We were just talking about how we have all taken on, it's kind of like a constant, I haven't been asked to do any hype videos yet, fortunately, but like it's a constant adding on to the job, as we all know. And as we've had to evolve and include more and more stuff in what we're trying to do, I think what has happened with me, I can speak for myself, is that I start allowing stuff to go out that to me is not to the level that it should be if we're going to put it out under our name, right? Because it's like trying to do 10 things in 1 hour, and some of that ends up being real mediocre. And so our goal with what I'm going to do today, and hopefully set a good tone with this as best as I can, is to see how we as a group can help each other figure out ways to work smarter, not harder, to do good work in less time. That sounds too good to be true. It probably is, but we're gonna try. Okay. So one of the things that leads to this conversation, and this is something I've been on my soapbox about lately. This was on the COSIDA website, and basically asking folks in the profession whether they would recommend to other folks to do this job. And as you can see, it's not the clearest thing in the world, but 54%, would you recommend a career in athletics communications? No. Would you recommend a career in college athletics? 40% said no. So what I would like us to be thinking about is, how can we change that narrative? I think, do we all enjoy the work that we do? I mean, I think most of us, if not all of us, really enjoy this work. So why wouldn't we recommend it? Well, because we know all of the sacrifices that go along with it. And we also know that, the job isn't what it was 10 years ago or whatever. So, but I'm kind of thinking, I'm starting to personally think about, okay, what can we do to make this job sustainable for future generations, so that the folks that follow us don't walk into the same mess that we've created, which I know I've created a mess here by raising the level of what we do and adding all this stuff on, which is all good, especially the raising the level of what we do. But at some point, you can't do it all. So, again, too many responsibilities can often lead to a lot of mediocre work. So talking about writing today, I'm just going to try to give you some very basic ideas to think about when it comes to writing. And I know that we all have our own ways of writing. Some of us do bullet points, some of us do stories, some of us do different things. And more power to you. Whatever you want to do that makes sense for you and your skill set is awesome. But hopefully maybe something that I talk about here in this short little presentation can help, make it just that much easier for you, a little bit easier. So the number one thing about writing in any format is, who are you writing for? Who are you picturing is going to read this as you go? And this could be, something that it's sort of up to your administration. It might be completely up to you. It might be based on your locale. For us at Chico, we've traditionally had fairly strong media coverage. So in the past, I really focused on making sure that our media was able to use the stuff that we wrote. But now, honestly, in the last 3 or 4 years, that's dipped pretty hard. And I've really just, when I'm writing a story, I'm imagining my student athletes, my donors, those fans and family members reading this story and what it's going to do for them. Okay. So I want, if a kid hits a game-winning shot, I'm thinking about this kid's mom or dad is going to put this story in their scrapbook, and I want them to go look back on it fondly. So knowing your audience is really important. If you're writing for the local media, you all know this, they want the basics. They don't want the flowery stuff. They want the basics. So for me, if I've got something that I'm writing for with that audience in mind, it's the who, what, when, why, where, how. And then I write that and I send that out, and then I say to myself, does this work for our website? If it was a loss, it probably does. If the game was, a blowout when we played, some, no offense, but NAIA school and beat them by 47 points, then what I wrote is probably good enough, But if, someone broke a record or whatever, and maybe I want to enhance it, then I can move on from there. This is normally where I'm at right now in my wheelhouse is, if my audience is my student athletes, their families, our donors, our supporters, then, I look at it as an opportunity to, again, contribute to that student athlete experience. What is, Jane Doe gonna think about this story? Like, how much is she gonna be excited to see that this story is about the fact that, sure, she came off the bench and her career high is only 8 points, but those 8 points she scored tonight were crucial to the team's success. So I'm going to take this opportunity to write about Jane, and really focus this writing on her. And then obviously, I'm thinking in terms of our fundraising. I'm thinking in terms of, how am I helping to create financial support for our department? So those are the kind of things I'm thinking about when I'm putting a story together. How to improve your writing before the game. So to be prepared to write something, read good writing. I know that we all love sports, or we wouldn't be in this business. So when you're reading something on The Athletic or something, from one of your favorite sports writers, think about it in terms of your, maybe sometimes don't, maybe just leave work behind. But if, but if the feeling's right, then yeah, think about how this story affected you and why. And it doesn't even have to be a sports article, honestly. Like, I love podcasts. I think that helps me be creative in my writing when I'm listening to good podcasting, a good book, whatever it is. Like, don't be afraid to steal ideas from people, in the way that they format something or the way that they think about something. There's also a book by Roy Peter Clark, who spoke at COSIDA a few years ago, and it's called Writing Tools. And it's these short little things, like just basic ideas. And if you're interested in improving your writing, it's a really fun one. Literally, maybe TMI, but mine was in my bathroom for a long time. And I would just read like 2 quick pages, and it would be like simple little tips about a sentence structure. You want your most powerful word in that sentence to be the last word of that sentence. And you want the most powerful word in your paragraph to be the last word of that paragraph. Things like that. So you're thinking about fun stuff like that. And then know your student athletes, read your bios. You're writing them, but remember, try to keep in mind, like, oh, this kid wrestled an alligator one time. Like, how could that ever, find its way into a story that I write? Or this kid loves working with children, or whatever it is. A lot of those times we can use a game story. Let's just say, we're playing Dominican and we beat them by 20 in a preseason basketball game, and John Smith scores 12 points, and there's really nothing all that noteworthy. You can write your first paragraph, the Chico State men's basketball team beat Dominican 92-72 at Acrogen, blah, 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 blah. And then you can weave, John Smith's story into that post-game article, kind of a little bit, make it a little bit of a feature story. And I think that becomes a more compelling story. How to improve your writing during the game. one thing that I struggle with, I because you sit there and you watch the game, you think the play-by-play is super important. I'm telling you, like when you get 7 paragraphs into a story and you start reading about who scored the first basket of the game, goodbye. People are leaving. I think we need to remember that. Like, I think we get tempted to think, well, I'm going to do my first half play-by-play during halftime, so then I'm just going to add that to the end of my story. I personally think you're wasting your time, barring something that, you know, was really outstanding about that first half play-by-play. You know, I really try to think of it as there's a decisive moment in the game, or a decisive little period of time during the game, and anything that happened before that, maybe you use a sentence to summarize it, but you don't want to get into that play-by-play. Instead of thinking about, you know, instead of that working on that play-by-play during the game, start thinking about things that are fun and, you know, creative. Like, you've noticed that, you know, there's something unique about the way that, you know, Jimmy shoots the basketball, and you start to think about how you could illustrate that in a story, and you could show people what that looks like in writing, whatever it might be. You know, emotional and moving exchanges between teammates, coaches, and fans are always exciting to explore. If you feel something personally, emotionally, something draws some emotion out of you, then to me, it's like, bam, that's what I want to write about. After the game, you know, quotes. Oftentimes I don't take the time to get quotes. This year, I've spent a lot more time talking on the phone with student athletes and getting their input and realizing just how many gems there are in there. You know, you talk to a student athlete for 2 minutes, it's amazing some of the things you find out, some of the things they say. So take those couple minutes and get a quote. And then what I like to do, and again, understanding that writing is my favorite thing about this job, I like to get everything done after the game, get situated back in the office, please God, back in the office. And then I like to take a walk around the block and just think about what I'm going to write. Like, what to me is important about that game? What do I want to say? And then I kind of formulate kind of make an outline in my head, and then go in there and get it done. Again, don't waste your time on a lot of play-by-play. Don't do it because you feel like you have to do it. You know, obviously sometimes you have to write the story, but like, don't feel like, oh, I always have to say what happened in the first half, like, or I have to put the 5 leading scorers or the leading rebounders or anything like that. Like, if it doesn't feel like important to you, it's probably not going to feel important to the people that are reading it. Let's see. Show, don't tell. You know, like I've used a lot of that decisive moments of the game thing, and just describe a decisive moment, you know, just really, you know, as simple as, you know, Joshua Curls took 2 dribbles to his left and spun to his right, and then before you know it, you know, he was hitting the biggest jump shot of his life, period. Like, you want to read more about that after you hear that, right? So just describe what you saw in the most, you know, show, don't tell. And it's, that stuff is compelling to people. Obviously, student athletes, personal stories, people love, they're engaging. A strong quote can be a great way to kick off a story and get people engaged. And then even, like, you know, what's your mission as a department? What are you trying to communicate as a communicator in that department? Is there a way to weave our story as a department, our culture as a department, into this big win that we just had, or this loss that we just absorbed that was heartbreaking, but this is how our culture came through in this moment? So thinking that kind of big picture. And then the last thing, obviously, spell check. You know, if honestly, the way I do it is, you know, if this is kind of a run-of-the-mill game story, I spell check it, I reread it once, and I put it up online. If this is like, this was kind of special tonight, and I think a lot of people are going to be interested in it, I'll read it out loud, because it really helps catch things that you might miss just by reading it. And then obviously you want to write an interesting headline. You know, the headline is what's going to grab people and make them, start reading. And then you hopefully have that lead that keeps them going. And then, if you're proud of it, I think this is something that that we often mistake. And I think this comes down to whatever you're good at with this job is the things that you do that you do well, like highlight those things, man. Get them out there and post them Friday night after the game, and then come back on, if you have to come back in on Saturday, post them on Saturday, repost them, in case you missed it, kind of a thing. Get that stuff out there and let that work that you do really well shine. So does anybody have any questions or thoughts?
Luke, how do you come up with those interesting headlines?
Well, I mean, I think sometimes I write an interesting headline and you think, oh, Luke always has interesting headlines. Trust me, there's lots of headlines that are not interesting on our website. But I mean, for me, it's, again, and this is where I feel like I'm most proud of what I do. So I probably spend a little bit more time on it than some of you might. And that's probably where they come from. I think, I guess one tip I would have for you is this: that you have your lead and then you have your headline. And those are oftentimes the temptation is that your headline is very similar to your lead. For me, I think when you can, one trick to an interesting headline is something that's deeper into your story that is a little bit mysterious. Like, so in other words, you don't want your headline to tell the story. You want it to grab someone and go, what does that mean? Like, what is that about? So like, I'm just trying to think of something that I've seen lately that, so I was listening to the UCLA game on the radio when they beat, who did they just beat? Michigan, my championship team. And there was some kid that didn't score, and then with like 4 minutes left, he scored 2 straight big baskets for UCLA. So I'm just kind of in my mind thinking of what I could make for a headline here. Your headline could be, if this kid's name is LaRue, it was something like that, like LaRue's Big Two, propels UCLA. Mm-hmm. What does that make you want to do? Well, what are we talking about? What are LaRue's Big Two? What does that mean? Like, well, it was his 2 big baskets, but you got to read to the 5th paragraph to get to it, or whatever. But I think it's something, so your headline, your lead should sort of be that, like, the real core information. But your headline to me is more of like an opportunity to sort of create some mystery. Hey, Daniel. So I guess that's what I would say.
I think, Luke, just to interject, and it's partly my sense of humor, but I've always enjoyed the play on words when it comes to headlines. If it comes easily, if you have to stretch to come up with a play on words, it's not worth it, because if you're stretching to get it, your readers are going to stretch to get it too. The one that came to mind for me was 2 years ago, our indoor track championships. Seattle Pacific has an athlete named Peace Igbanagwam, and she opened the first day by winning the long jump and getting into the finals in a couple of running events. And so my headline was, Peace gives Seattle Pacific a chance on first day.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It was easy. It was easy to come up with, and it drew people into the story because they're going to want to know, okay, Seattle Pacific did well, and this Peace girl did well. Well, what did they do?
Yeah, and I think that's a good, so what you saw there was an interesting name, someone named Peace that did really well. And so you go, okay, well, how could I make Peace into a headline, right? So I think that kind of, when I came up with that LaRue's Big Two or whatever, obviously that comes from the name LaRue. It could be, some other descriptor that you used or whatever. But yeah, I think probably a lot of my good headlines start with a name or a word or a moment, and then my brain goes, well, how can I make that into an interesting headline? Anything else? Any other questions or thoughts?
I got a question for you, Luke, and this is maybe along the lines of more feature writing than it is gamers. The thing I always struggle with feature writing is transcribing the interview. I would probably write more feature stories if it wasn't for going back and needing to transcribe everything when I talk to a player or coach. What tips do you have on making the transcribing process a little bit easier?
Well, there's two things I would say. One is, if it doesn't feel like, when I'm talking to a student athlete, I almost always type while they're talking. And I just basically get the general, I can type usually about as quick as they're talking. And I'll tell them beforehand, hey, I'm going to type what you're saying to me. So if there's a break after you stop, that's okay. It's just me catching up to you. So for me, then my transcription is done during my interview. It obviously has some spelling errors and all that stuff, so you'll want to clean that up as you go. But if it's a different type of interview where I feel like that's not appropriate, then what I will do is I'll take a note and I will literally write like a couple of key words as they're talking to me. And like, I'm talking to Janet and she says, my mom and dad have been to every single game I've ever been to in my whole career. And it's just something that has motivated me. I'll write mom and dad, and then she'll say later on, when I saw that pass get slipped through the defense and I looked up and it was only me and the goalie, I knew it was my time to shine, whatever. So I'll write goal. Like, this is her description of her goal. And so then as I'm writing my story, oftentimes when I have some good quotes, my lead will have something to do with like one of the quotes. And then I'll be able to write my story. And as I'm thinking about what she talked about, and I'm writing about, like all of a sudden I want to now transition to talking about how, she used to play tennis for whatever reason. And I have a quote about that. Then I can look down on my list and hopefully I've written tennis down, Otherwise I have to go search for it. Right. But that sort of just, because I'm sorry, the other piece is I'll write the time down, obviously, if I'm like using my phone for the interview or whatever. But even if I don't write the time down, if I have the list, I can sort of forward through and get what I want. So I don't transcribe everything, I guess is what I'm saying. I have my notes, and then if I need to transcribe it, I do. But I understand, I feel the same way. I mean, I've been doing a feature story every week, and it's hard right now, even, like I'm always lamenting how I don't do enough features during a regular year. And now I'm like, of course I don't. Like, it's a day's worth of work for me to write a good feature story. I don't have that time, which is unfortunate because I feel like it's some of the coolest things I've written since I got this job, but I don't know if I'll be able to keep doing it when we kind of re-engage.
Anybody else have any thoughts or questions for Luke?
Luke, I have one other question. How, in this day and age when everything is instant, right? How do you balance getting it out quick versus being thoughtful and the things that are in this presentation? Do you have any pushback? Do you get any pushback about like, sorry, my gamer's going to take an hour or two or whatever?
No, I don't. I haven't experienced that. I think, I think if the local media needs something, I can throw a who, what, when, where, why thing together in 5 minutes. And that's just, I realize that's not the case for everybody. But like, so I can do that and get them what they need and then do my thing. And the truth of the matter is like, and this could be right, it could be wrong, I don't know. But like, gosh dang it, if this is the thing I love about my job, I'm going to enjoy it.
Yeah.
I'm going to do it my way. And if somebody has a problem with that, they can come tell me and we can figure it out. But like, you know, I will say that I believe that, you know, I have developed strong relational ties with a lot of our student athletes because once in their 4-year career, I wrote a story that they found to be, you know, meaningful to them, that they felt like I took the time to really get it right, and that that has a lot of meaning to them. And I think, and this is what I will tell my boss, like, I think that pays dividends from us from the our reputation standpoint, and also from a financial standpoint. I think that's going to pay off in the end. So again, I do not suggest that all of you take a lot of time to write stories, because if that's not your skill set, you should be focusing in on what if you're great at putting video highlights together, people freaking love that. Do it and do it well. If you're good at, you know, whatever it is you're good at, like, I think do it. But when it comes to writing, like, you know, I do believe that if you think creatively, even if you just spend, you know, 20 minutes on a story, that one quote or one kind of show don't tell moment in that story can really elevate it and make it meaningful to people. So, but yeah, that, I think that's the thing that I just want to make sure that's communicated here is don't walk away from this presentation going, man, I really need to work longer and harder on my writing. I think figure out something that's somewhere in here that helps you take less time on it and maybe do a tiny bit better of a job. And then we've nailed it, you know?
Luke, I got a question for you. I mean, you may or may not know the answer to this, but I'll give it a shot. Well, I think we're in a day and age where student athletes are more concerned about getting pictures of themselves and video of themselves. How do you, I guess, motivate or influence a student athlete when it comes to story writing? Because I've run into that several times.
Yeah.
That's an interesting question. I disagree with the premise, to be completely honest with you. I think that a student athlete, that if you write a story that's focused on a great moment in a student athlete's life, I think they'll appreciate that as much as a video or a picture. I think, you know, videos and pictures are easy to share on social media. So I think oftentimes they maybe in the moment would rather have a video of their game-winning slam dunk or 3-pointer than they would a story that takes 10 minutes to read. But I think in the end, I think they will find that story as valuable as the video or the photo. But again, if you can get a great video of that game-winning shot, to me, that's as valuable as writing the story about it or taking the photo of it. You know, wherever your strengths are, you know, lean into those strengths is my, now maybe that's not your boss's advice and maybe that's not COSIDA's advice, I don't know, but that's my advice. And that's the tact I am taking personally.